So we'll take it as an empowering story, because there is something which is always in our control, and there are so many characters in the Palace of Queens who have taken vows, who are tied to their own words. They are bound by the promises they make, be it Bhishma, be it Kunti, be it Drupad, Dronacharya, or even Draupadi herself. Let me add to this: if Bhishma would have agreed to break the vow and he would have married Amba, then there was no Shikhandi. And the story would have been different. And if Pandavas would have reasoned with their mother and convinced Kunti that only Arjun should stay with Draupadi, things would have been different. Comparing it with our age, by and large, we don't respect our words and commitments, and we have not only normal human beings, but great leaders. We see they break their commitments not only to themselves, to their family, but to the masses. So now it's liberating in some way if you break your word and you become flexible, or it reduces our heights as human beings. What do you think?
I think one has to remember what Buddha said, which is to follow the golden mean, the middle path, not an extreme in this and not an extreme in that. I think sometimes we say, not knowing the future or not being wise enough, we say something or we make a promise. And maybe that is not the best promise to make. Bhishma was a great person, but if he hadn't felt so tied to his word to protect the Kaurava throne, then perhaps, the battle would not have happened. If Kunti hadn't felt that she absolutely had to have her word become true and the brothers marry, all 5 brothers marry Draupadi, certainly Draupadi's life would have been different. And there are many other examples. Karna, because Karna has decided that he has to be loyal to Duryodhan, no matter how bad Duryodhan is, because he is Duryodhan's friend and Duryodhan has helped him. So we admire these people for their loyalty, but we also realize that they're not always the wisest in their vows. I think the Mahabharata tells us that, shows us that sometimes people make a vow, it's not the wisest one. And we can respect them for sticking to it, but we also see that the effect of it is not good. So my take on it is, certainly we should value our words, but we have to be intelligent about it as well and follow the middle path.
That's really very interesting, because in a way, ultimately, you are putting the responsibility for deciding the correct path on the individual concern. You have to find your own way.
You have to. I think that is true. And I think, in both our Ramayana and Mahabharata, we see when the word is followed to the extreme, how much sorrow it can cause, how much pain it can cause. It causes Dasharath's death. It causes Sri Ram to be banished. Again, these stories are very complex, because we say that because of that, then Ravan gets killed. So we don't know all of the connections in the cosmic, on the cosmic level. But at least on the human level, I think.
Yeah, I think in some way, Lord Krishna resonates with what you said, because he kind of became eager to break his vow of not taking Astra Shastra when Arjuna was refusing to hit Bhishma Pitama.
Right. And Lord Krishna actually does show, especially in the flawed world of the Mahabharata, that sometimes you cannot keep to your word. You have to do what is best in that situation. Situations change, so the original idea with which you made a promise may not be valid anymore.
I'm also impressed by the subtle way in which you have brought Lord Krishna's references in the book. Talk to us about that moment when Draupadi has no one to look up to in Duryodhana's Sabha. You did mention about it when Pandavas have lost her in gambling. The reference is very, very well known, but your book offers some fresh and original insight into this scene. Share with us, how did you manage to tell that which has already been told and added something so fresh without losing its sanctity?
Well, thank you. That was a very challenging scene to write. What I wanted to do in this book, in the Palace of Illusions, is apart from just telling the story, I see it as Draupadi's quest. It is the quest of the soul, the spiritual quest of the soul. And as she goes through her life, opportunities are given to her which are challenges, but which are also a chance to learn something spiritual. So at that moment, which is a moment of great agitation and sorrow for her, when she turns inward and she thinks of Lord Krishna, she becomes calm. And so Krishna gives her the advice that your strength is inside yourself, that no matter what they are doing to you, unless you give it importance, no one can harm you, no one can shame you unless you allow them to. And she turns inward and she finds a lot of strength. And that gives her the power to go through that moment. And it is only when she turns away from Krishna and what he is saying inside her and remembers all of them outside who are humiliating her, that she falls away from that inner peace into anger and into the curse that she will pronounce, which will lead to the war.
So the important thing is to keep focusing on Krishna, or that which is supreme truth.
Yes, exactly. I think that is the lesson that she's given, that if you turn inward, that inside you is all the strength, all the peace that you ever need. And no one outside can touch that part of you. But she is not ready to learn that lesson. So
I think nobody is, in a way. And Chitra, war is always present in our lives in some way. On the page 263 of the Palace of Illusions, on the backdrop of Mahabharata war, Draupadi is thinking war is like an avalanche. Once begun, it cannot cease until it has wreaked all the destruction it is capable of. Should we avoid war at any cost all the time? Who is capable of deciding when the war is justified? What is the hidden suggestion in your book about it?
Well, first of all, that is a very important and complex question you ask, and I think the Mahabharata also asks that question. I think what the Mahabharata points out is that at some points war cannot be avoided, but what it is pointing out is that the cost of war is so high that we certainly should not rush into it. Even when you are fighting a righteous war like the Pandavas are, they have tried everything before they go into the war. They are going to suffer just as much by the end of that war. At the end of that war, the land is devastated, their families are devastated, their children are dead, and it is a very high cost they pay. So I think the message that is timely and for us to think about is, so many thousands of years have passed since the events and the writing of the Mahabharata, and yet as human beings we have not learned a better way. So maybe what the Mahabharata is saying, which relates to us today, is let's look for a better way. Let's look for other ways of solving conflicts. If we look at all the wars that are going on right now in the world, it seems that on that front, as human beings, we haven't progressed at all.
So hopefully we will progress, and I feel the Palace of Illusions would be loved and cherished by knowledge seekers from generation to generation. It has the potential of, I'm saying very big thing, that it has the potential of immortalizing Chitra Banerjee Divakaruni's name.
Thank you so much for saying that from your mouth to Lord Krishna's ears.
Before we wind up this conversation, two more quick questions. One, you have dedicated this book to your three men, Abhay, Anand and Murthy, and we also read your acknowledgement to the blessings of Baba Muktananda, Swami Chinmayanandaji and Swami Vidya Dishanandaji. Can you tell us how blessings of sages have its impact on the creative process of a writer, especially when you're writing a book like The Palace of Illusions?
Whenever I'm writing, and particularly with this task because it was such a large and challenging task, I always feel that the writing does not come from me, not from the ego level, but from something much deeper inside, and that is a divine blessing. The ideas that come, the words, images, I can't really take credit for them. I just feel very blessed and thankful that they're coming through me into the world. So I'm always aware that it is not my doing, but some greater power, and I am just the instrument. And I think being in touch with the teachings of these Mahatmas has really made that happen. And also, I think these Mahatmas have really blessed this particular project and this book as well, and I'm very appreciative and grateful to them. And I think we should tell our audience about my 3 men before they start getting a wrong idea.
I know.
Murthy is my husband, and Anand and Abhay are my 2 sons.
And have they read this book?
Murthy has read it already. Anand and Abhay are still younger, but I'm hoping they will definitely read it. They're quite excited about the idea of a book on the Mahabharata.
Wow. And the concluding pages of your book sums up the Vedanta philosophy. Draupadi asks Krishna, "Are you truly divine?" "Yes, I am. You are too, you know." I'm tempted to read this line from the last page of your book. "I am beyond name and gender and the imprisoning patterns of ego." Sage Vyasa was said to be restless after having completed writing Mahabharata, which is also referred to as Pancham Ved, 5th Veda. And then because he was feeling restless and he wrote Srimad Bhagavat to tell the story of Lord Krishna. What will you offer to the readers after the Palace of Illusions?
Well, my next task is actually writing 2 books for children. I think it is very important to write for children, especially our children growing up in this country, for them to have Indian characters and Indian situations to relate to in books and to admire. So I'm working on 2 books for children, one of which is a magical adventure. It's called Shadowland, and it continues the characters that were in my earlier 2 children's books, Conch Bearer and the Mirror of Fire and Dreaming. And Shadowland is the final book of the series. And I'm also very interested in our folk tales. So I've just finished retelling one of our Bengali folk tales that I heard my grandfather tell me when I was little. And this book is called Grandma and the Giant Gourd, like Gourd. And it is about this wonderful and very clever grandmother and how she escapes from all the wild animals of the forest. So I'm really looking forward to sharing these books with the children of our country and our culture that are living here.
Wonderful. My guest today, Chitra Banerjee Divakaruni, author of The Palace of Illusions, story of Mahabharata retold in a way, a fresh way, from the point of view of Draupadi. Lots of good wishes to you, and thank you very much for coming to ITV studio and sharing all this knowledge of this wealth of knowledge.
Thank you for having me here.
This is Ashok. Thanking all of you for being with us.